video is going to be about how to teach the novel Farewell to Manzanar. I taught this to my 6th grade English classes this year, and I just really like hearing how other people went through a unit or went through a project, just to kind of hear what other teachers' successes were, or maybe the things that were a little bit more difficult. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Rather than like a full-on professional development type of a thing, this is just going to be as if you and I were sitting in the teacher's lounge at lunch talking about how our lessons were going. If you are looking to teach this novel, or maybe you're just looking for any novel to do next year, then maybe this can just give you a few ideas and tips. So like I mentioned, I teach 6th grade ELA, and this year our district was really big on Lexile level, and so Farewell to Manzanar is at a 6th grade Lexile level. It's a little bit complex, I would say, for 6th graders, and last year we did the K, which is a little bit more simple. This was more of a struggle, but Lexile level wise, this is what lines up. I had actually been given a whole class set of these books even before I officially was a teacher. One of the parents of one of my piano students gave me this set, just, you know, kind of in faith that one day I would teach this. So I thought that was really, really cool that I happened to have them already. One thing that you kind of have to decide before you teach a novel, and I don't really know what the best answer is to this, is whether your students are each going to have their own copy or whether you're just going to have a class set or what. So I just had my personal class set, and then a few weeks before we started the novel, I sent an email to all the parents and I sent home a flyer telling them that if their students had their own copy, they could get 20 points of extra credit, which I think is very generous. And I gave them a link to Amazon where they could get it for a penny plus shipping. At Barnes & Noble, this is $8.99. So this is not really an expensive book, but very few of my students ended up getting a copy for themselves. The population that I work with just doesn't really buy books. I think that's just a reality that I had to deal with. So most students did not have their own copy. So I wasn't really able to assign like reading for homework or even assignments for homework because they didn't have the book. So it took us quite a while to get through it because we read everything in class together. We started or completely did most of the assignments in class. So this did take us about a month and a half to get through. As far as getting through the actual book and using reading strategies, there were about 4 different things that I did. So sometimes I would just read the book. I would read like a chapter or a section of a chapter or something like that. And 6th graders actually loved being read to. And I think it's good to model good reading, good pronunciation, good inflections, things like that. Students don't always get to hear that. So I think that that was useful sometimes. I would also have students just volunteer to read. So my students are in little groups, and so, you know, anybody from group 1, do you want to read? Group 2, do anybody from that group want to read? And so sometimes I would take volunteers, and normally it was the same readers over and over again. And it was usually the kids that were already pretty good readers. So that didn't really help my students who are struggling. So another strategy that I would use is I would have the entire class read the first sentence of a paragraph, and then I would finish the paragraph. So they would just have to read like, the start of World War II was not the climax to our life in Ocean Park. And the whole class would have to read that, and then I would continue. Pearl Harbor just snipped it off, stopped it from becoming whatever else lay ahead. So I was able to kind of keep the speed up because usually when students read, it's pretty slow. But they would just get that first sentence, and then I would kind of finish through the rest of the paragraph, and then they would read the next sentence at the beginning of the next paragraph, and then I would finish. So that kind of made sure that students were paying attention and they knew where we were, and then they were able to kind of like hear the rhythm that I had set and the pronunciation that I had set, and then kind of copy it. So I think that was a pretty good strategy. And the final strategy that I would use is sometimes there was dialogue, and so I would have students just kind of act it out. And there's actually not a ton of dialogue in this book, but if there was a conversation between like the mom and the dad, then sometimes I would just assign that, okay, you're gonna be the mom, you're gonna be the dad, and they would get to read those parts. And usually it was like an argument, so they kind of got into that. And then chapter 7 specifically, this one is chapter 7, Fort Lincoln, an interview. This just occurs between 2 people, and this is kind of a unique chapter, but there's an interviewer and then the dad is being interviewed. And so I just broke everybody up into partners, and they kind of got to spread out around the classroom, and there's nothing else besides the dialogue. It's just, it doesn't even say like "What's your full name?" said the interviewer. It's just, "What's your full name?" Wakatsuki ko, your place of birth. And so it just goes straight through the dialogue like a script. And so I had students just break up, and each one would be a different part, and they would read through the script. And so if there were an odd number of students that day, then I would just pair up with one of the lower readers that kind of struggled, and then we would read together. And that was really cool, and the students really, really liked this chapter, and they liked kind of getting to act out a little scene. So as far as pacing, we read a chapter or two per day, but then I also used a really great resource. This is a curriculum set that I got off of teacherspayteachers.com, which I love. I love that website. And so this was created by Miss Teacher LA, and I wasn't able to find like a Facebook page or an Instagram or anything from Miss Teacher LA, but I really like her page, so I will link it below, her shop on Teachers Pay Teachers. She has a lot of really good resources, and this one was excellent. This was $25, but you get almost 150 pages worth of curriculum. She has a little introduction, and so I just printed mine out and put it into this binder, and then I have all the different sections kind of separated out, so easier to hold it this way. A vocabulary section, comprehension, discussion, journals, figurative language, activities, characters, language, writing, and a nonfiction section as well. So this is much more than you will ever use probably in one unit, but you're able to kind of pick and choose just what fits your students specifically, and it's really great to have, you know, more resources than you need. So she gives you different options for vocabulary, and this is the one that I used where we had a word that we didn't know, and then the meaning and a graphic. I find though that vocabulary just takes so long to get through. I sense that like before I became a teacher, there must have been a really big emphasis on vocabulary, because it seems that in English and in history actually, because I also teach social studies, it seems like in social studies people are huge on vocabulary. Which I understand. I mean, it's hard for students to grasp the content if they don't understand any of the vocabulary. But we kind of did vocabulary at the beginning, and we would apply it to specific sentences. So we would read a sentence that had kind of a difficult word, and then we would do the vocabulary worksheet. And then we would go back and look at the sentence again. Like, now understanding this word, how does this sentence kind of change for you? Does it mean something different now? Do you understand it better? But then once I kind of taught them that skill, we kind of moved on from vocabulary, and if they didn't understand a word, they would just raise their hand and ask what it meant, because that's faster. So I didn't do a ton of vocabulary development. I'm sure that was terrible, but we got into a lot of other stuff. So the comprehension questions were the next thing, and these questions are not written out so that students can like answer them. They don't have, it's not like a worksheet, it's more just like for the teachers. So as we finished a question, I would just verbally ask them the questions, and I already have my students in little discussion groups, and so they would usually answer them as a group, and then I would just kind of check for understanding when we were done. But I didn't really print out comprehension questions, to be honest. The discussion questions were my favorite part. This is what they look like, and it keeps on altering my lighting when I hold this up, so I might not always hold it up. You can go to the Teachers Pay Teachers website and get a preview of what all of this looks like, but I just kind of wanted to show you in general what it looks like. So for the discussion questions, again, they're not like written out so that you can answer them in written form. But what I would do is, okay, so this has discussion questions for chapters 1 through 4, and it has like 2 or 3 questions per chapter. So when we finished chapter 4, the next day we didn't do any reading, I don't think, and so I had my students already in groups of 4, and I just printed out these discussion questions for each student. So they would each get to choose a question that they wanted to lead a discussion on. So they chose one question and then a backup just in case somebody else stole their question too. So I set a timer for 2 minutes, and so the first person in the group would just pose the question. They would have to read it verbatim, you know, so that they were using proper language, academic language. So they would pose the question, and then the next student would get 30 seconds to answer, and no one was allowed to respond or interrupt them or anything. It's just 30 seconds of them responding to the question. Then the next person would get 30 seconds, the next person 30 seconds, and then the person who posed the question got to give kind of their final thoughts. So it was only 2 minutes. That's not very much time, but it was kind of perfect. Some of them weren't really able to talk for more than 30 seconds, and then some of them, it kind of forced them to just be more concise. So it was really, really good. And then as they were discussing, I would walk around, and we have these little cougar cards that you can turn in for prizes at the office. So every round, I would walk around and just listen for who was having the best discussion, and I would give out one cougar card. So as I walked by, they would really like up their discussions and make sure they were sounding really smart and stuff. So that actually worked fabulously. So after that 2-minute round, then we would move on to the next student. They would get to start the discussion and then would answer. So each group did 4 questions. The discussion questions were probably my favorite part of this unit. So that was really cool. One tip that I have as well, in my class, one of the things that I always say is pay attention with your face, because I can't stand when students are like, I am paying attention, I am paying attention, I am paying attention. I'm like, no, you're not. You need to look this way and we don't move on until everyone is paying attention with their face. So that's a big thing already that we do. And then we kind of have this joke too about your date face. So I tell my students, you know, when you get older and you're on a date with somebody, they might be talking about something really boring, but you like them, and so you still need to look like you care about what they're saying. So you might be on the date with this really beautiful girl and she's talking about her chihuahua and his kidney surgery or something, and you're like, I do not care about this, but you need to, oh yes, act like you're interested, right? Or this really cute guy might be talking about the rims he just got for his truck and you really don't care, but you're trying to act interested. So when we do our discussions, I tell them they need to have their date face on, and even if they don't really like the person that they're having a discussion with, and even if they don't think that their answer is the greatest answer ever, they need to listen intently and look like they're interested. And so they usually take this really far and just totally make it cheesy, but it works. It gets them to pay attention to each other and not interrupt each other.